First Timothy 1:17. It's it's going to take us more time to get through it than it already has. Man, it's so rich and deep and full. I don't want to skip over or run through any of it. As you know, my tendency is to camp out uh, and stay a long time. Well, I'm going to try not to do that either, but camp out I'm going to do. Uh, Gosh, I love this. Now, to the King, eternal, immortal, invisible, the only God, be honor and glory forever and ever. Amen. Ooh. Last time I said this would be a great way to start the day and end the day, because this is both a statement of praise and a full on statement of reality and truth. The King is eternal. The King is immortal. He is invisible. He is the only God. Now, I jumped up and down on this pretty hard last time, but there's, believe it or not, still a little more blood to squeeze from the turnip. He is the only God. We look at that. If you know, I don't imagine there are probably any folks, who've clicked this up who aren't already Christians and going to church and all of that. So we look at this and think, well, duh, the only God, yeah. Well, two things. Let's look at Paul's day. Paul is writing to Timothy, who has been stationed at Ephesus. Now, think about, if you've read through the book of Acts, you know that Ephesus gets pretty good ink there on in the history of the beginning of the church. Paul came within a hair's width of being probably murdered in a riot in Ephesus, which was the home of Diana. I'm not sure that Diana was not the equivalent with Aphrodite's, but Artemis was the Greek name for Diana, and she was a goddess of beauty and fertility, and these were physical beauty, sexual fertility. She was a very sexual goddess, and she was everywhere. Or let me rephrase that. Her image was everywhere. If you ever get the chance to look at an exhaustive encyclopedia of Bible times and places, you'll probably see a depiction, at least, of what archaeologists and historians believe was the image of Artemis, Diana. Dozens of breasts across her front. Well, that's, to us, it's a grotesque picture. I mean, it just is. But not to the Ephesians. This was the image of their local goddess. All right, so now Paul is writing that the King eternal, immortal, invisible, is the only God. This would have been brand new news. This was a spanking new concept for Ephesus. Also, don't lose track of the fact that they were not the Ephesians, and we have to, unpack the whole Acts encounter, Paul's encounter in Acts, and that it was the silversmiths who kind of launched this, or were the catalyst for the riot that took place, because as Christians accepted Christ, they turned away from the worship of Artemis, Diana, and this became an economic issue for the silversmiths, because they had been using their resources of silver, fashioning these idols that people would buy, and that Paul was taking money out of their pocket, and they weren't going to stand for that. Well, there was still no small amount of resistance to the idea that there was one God. You see, the Ephesians didn't believe that Diana or Artemis was the only God. They just believed she was legitimately the God for them in their local geographic area. I don't think they teach Greek and Roman mythology much anymore in public schools. But I learned a little bit about Greek and Roman mythology when I was in high school, and a teeny bit more in college. And the main thing about it is there was a huge prevailing system of what, pardon me, actually was theology, but had nothing to do with the one God, the only God that Paul is referencing here. It just had to do with this cascading hierarchy of gods, beginning with Zeus at the top and moving all the way down through a broad, expansive system of local gods and goddesses. So it was a very polytheistic, meaning many gods, culture. And Paul writes to Timothy, don't ever give up the truth that this king is eternal, immortal, invisible, and the only God. Now that would have created waves in the Ephesian culture. It has a ton of application in our modern Western American culture. Americans don't really think of it this way, but we are a polytheistic culture. Really. We have many gods. And this is kind of an extension of logic. If you have many idols, that indicates you have many gods. And in America, in the West, and not only in America, and not only in our culture and society, but Western society and culture as a whole generally, we have many idols. And gosh, if you go to church, at a church that's half worth its salt, you've heard this lots and lots of times. There's the idol of success. Hey, you know what? It probably gets a lot of airtime, but that doesn't diminish the truth. There is an idol of success in our culture. There's an idol of politics, a philosophically entrenched idol of politics. And in our American culture, with the two-party system, it's one side or the other of the aisle. In the Senate and the House of Representatives, on Capitol Hill, in your state legislature, Democrats or Republicans. But these political philosophies, for a lot of people, are an idol. There's, I don't know that this word gets used anymore. When I was a teenager, there was a term called teen idol, and this was the I think it really it exists today. I don't think it gets those words, but the hip, popular, usually these come from the entertainment world that are idolized. Gosh, that life. They are so cool. They're so pretty. They're so handsome. They're such a stud. They're such, on and that goes. Okay, and I don't think there's any teenagers watching this, so you don't have a teen idol, do you? Well, what's an idol? What consists of an idol? An idol is essentially anything that represents what is most important in my life, or of great importance in my life. Money is an idol. It has been for millennia. Wealth, before there was money, there was wealth, and it was an idol. Acceptance, which a sociological term would be popularity, right? And a lot of times we think, well, that's just school kids. No, it's not. Not. Whoa, no. Adults. I hardly know any adult who doesn't want acceptance and popularity with someone. I know I see this on Facebook. To my shame, I still look at Facebook, but I see it on Facebook a lot. I don't really care who likes me or doesn't like me, and all. Wrong. Yes, you do. And caring whether or not I am liked by someone may or may not be an idol, but if I let that become one of the driving forces in my life, it is an idol. It is a god. And you, friend, don't outgrow that. You may grow to learn how to mitigate it and manage it and reduce its value in your life, and that's called maturity. But we don't outgrow the allure. And there are a lot of people who, I don't mean to throw rocks on this, but there are a lot of people whose addictions are their idol. And it might be a substance, chemical addiction. It could be the addiction to a sensation, things like gambling and pornography and sex. Anything can become an idol if we let it. And essentially, the best definition for an idol is anything that becomes as important to me as the only God. And Lord, deliver me from me. The influence, you've left me in the world for a purpose. And so I have to learn how to deal with the siren call of these influences and these other false gods all around me. Dear God, remind me that you are the only God. How do I reflect that in my life? If he is the King, eternal, immortal, invisible, and the only God, I've got to figure out, how do I live reflecting that as the central fact to which my life is anchored? And I can't give you everything about that. No, if I could, I wouldn't. We got to wrestle that down for ourselves. So here's your challenge for this installment. What would it look like? What does it look like when you live your life as though he was the King eternal, immortal, invisible, the only God? See you next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.